We've had the mysterious disappearances of Jimmy Hoffa, Amelia Earhart, D.B. Cooper, and many other puzzling cases that left us wondering what might have been. Few mysterious disappearances have stunned the public as that of a 28-year-old mother of 2 boys who famously remarked, "If I die, it may not be an accident, even if it looks like one." Today, we look at one of the most mysterious disappearances of all time. Hang on, guys, because this is one story ride with a twist too many. Okay? Welcome back to the channel, guys. We hope you're doing just fine. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on the post notification icon for updates from our channel. Our story begins at the turn of the millennium back in November 2000, when Joshua Powell met Susan at a diner in Puyallup, Washington. He had been childhood friends with Susan Cox, a classmate of Josh's at an Institute of Religion course run by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Things worked well between the two, and they began their relationship. By April 2001, Josh and Susan decided to tie the knot in a Portland, Oregon temple. After the wedding, they lived with Josh's father, Stephen Powell, briefly. But it seemed briefly was all it took for something to happen. Okay, we'll come back to that later in this video. Anyway, Josh and Susan went on to have Charles, their first child, in 2005, and Brandon, his brother, in 2007. So how did Susan disappear? On December 7, 2009, a routine drop-off of Charles and Brandon at the daycare did not happen. The daycare worker was worried and decided to place a call to them. They didn't answer both their cell phones and their home lines in West Valley City, Utah. The daycare provider went on to contact Susan's mother and her sister, who alerted the police. The initial fear of the police was that the Powell family had been victims of carbon monoxide poisoning. This fear prompted the police to break into Josh and Susan's home. The police didn't find anyone in the home, but noticed Susan's ID purse and wallet in the house, and 2 box fans blowing at a wet spot on the couch. The box fans could have been on in an attempt to dry the couch. Why was the fan left on, and why was there a wet spot on the couch? The police began questioning neighbors who explained that they had last seen the family the previous day, December 6, 2009, at the LDS church beside their home. One of their neighbors said that she visited them in the afternoon and left at about 5 p.m. when Susan needed a nap as she wasn't feeling well. This was the last time anyone saw Susan. Anyway, Josh returned home that evening at about 5 p.m. as expected. Josh was taken in for questioning, where he explained to the police that he had taken the boys camping by midnight at Simpson Spring in western Utah, and that he left Susan sleeping at home. Given the blizzard conditions and heavy snowstorms in western Utah by midnight, the police wondered why Josh would go camping at this time when he was scheduled to work the next day. Josh simply told the police that they liked to do fun things. All the while, the police hadn't been to Simpson Spring. Josh was ultimately released, and his residence was once again searched on December 9, 2009, where the police found what looked like traces of Susan's bloodstains, her life insurance policy, and a letter she wrote expressing fear for her own life. Police had called in 4-year-old Charlie, who confirmed that they camped at Simpson Spring, but said that their mother had followed them for the camping, which was contrary to Josh's account of Susan being asleep at their home. In the weeks following Susan's disappearance, Joshua was called in for questioning repeatedly. Local TV stations began to interview Josh in the following weeks, and by December 24, he was named a person of interest. Josh took Charlie and Brandon to his father Stephen's place in Puyallup for the holidays to get away from the media attention where they had lived shortly after their wedding. On January 6, 2010, Josh returned with his brother Michael Powell to pack his belongings permanently to Puyallup. Numerous claims of Charlie insinuating his mother was dead were also reported by child care workers. He reportedly told his carer that his mother was dead weeks after her disappearance. A few months later, he drew a van and said to his carers, "Mummy was in the trunk." Soon after, Josh relocated to Puyallup, A website was opened titled susanpal.org, and anonymous entries began to flood in as regards to her disappearance. Some users said it was a conspiracy by Susan's family and the LDS Church to blame Josh for murdering her. Some linked Susan's disappearance to Stephen Kocher, a journalist who had also mysteriously disappeared the same week. Josh claimed Susan had been unfaithful and that she ran off with Stephen Kocher. But like many leads in this case, there was no evidence to support this, so police dismissed this possibility. Josh and his brother Michael are widely believed to have made these comments on the website. Numerous findings from Susan's mail and journals showed she had trouble with her marriage, and many of her friends attributed this to Joshua's extravagant spending, as he had filed for bankruptcy in 2007. Her close friend Hollowell said he kept her at arm's length. You wouldn't kiss her anymore. You wouldn't touch her. He wouldn't hold her hand, she said. Following that year, Susan recorded a video where she expressed the turmoil in her marriage and stated, "If I die, it may not be an accident even if it looks like one." Apparently, Susan had suspected Joshua would kill her in a staged accident, but she had hoped that he would change. "I want him in counseling, on meds. I want my husband, friend, lover back. No more crazy, outrageous, outlandish beliefs or opinions," she wrote in an email to her friend dated July 11, 2008. One could only imagine how Susan lived her life for the following year, knowing her husband and lover could have murdered her anytime soon. She may have thought of divorcing Josh, who had a family history of abuse. Hang on though, there's still another twist to this story. Okay, back to Josh and Susan's wedding. The couple had briefly moved into Steve's home, where an unlikely affection had developed for his son's wife. Unlikely affection? Well, not quite. An obsessive and inflamed love, probably resulting from their proximity. Stephen followed Susan around the house with a camcorder and spied on her in the bathroom with a small mirror. He took his love a step further by posting love songs online under a pseudonym. He also read Susan's journal and occasionally stole her underwear from her laundry. Hollowell described Steve as the sickest pervert she had ever known. In 2010, findings revealed he was quite the description. In 2010, police also found computer images seized from Stephen's house to contain 4,500 images of Susan and her specific body parts, taken without her knowledge in 2003, 2 years after her marriage. Stephen had confessed his obsession for Susan in 2003, but Susan rejected him and the couple moved out of his home so she could distance herself from Stephen. Stephen captured his rejection moment on his camcorder as well. Why do you think Stephen was so obsessed with Susan? Police also discovered that Stephen also shared pornography with Joshua and his 2 brothers while they were growing up. And that became another twist in the story as police drew their attention to Michael, Joshua's brother. By this time, Michael had sold his faulty Ford Taurus truck shortly after Susan's disappearance. Police found the car, and a sniffer dog confirmed that a decomposing human body had been in the trunk, but DNA tests proved inconclusive. Charlie's words again come to mind. Mummy was in the trunk. On September 22, 2011, Stephen was arrested for voyeurism and child pornography after police found he had secretly videotaped numerous other young women. Tensions began to grow between Joshua and Susan's family after Stephen's arrest in 2011. Susan's dad, Chuck Cox, filed for custody of the 2 boys. Chuck was granted temporary custody, pending the time Joshua would move out of Stephen's house before Joshua could regain custody. Joshua went through a series of evaluations and criminal investigations, and it was determined that he had no criminal record or history of domestic violence, but that Joshua may have been paranoid from the unwanted media attention. By late 2011, West Valley City had spent over $500,000 on this case. The court eventually ruled supervised visits by a social worker several times a week for Joshua to the kids, a decision that proved a fatal blow in this story. Joshua was infuriated by losing custody of his kids after his father's arrest, And on February 5, 2012, a few days before he was scheduled to take a polygraph test, Elizabeth Griffin Hall, the social worker in charge of the supervised visits, called 911 after Joshua reportedly grabbed the boys and refused her entry to his house. Shortly after, the house exploded into flames. Joshua and his 2 sons were killed in the murder-suicide as local authorities discovered. Joshua had been deliberately planning the explosion. Investigators found 2 5-gallon cans of gasoline spread around the house and a hatchet corresponding to the hatchet wounds on the boys' necks, with which Joshua hacked the boys before they died. Joshua also contacted his close relatives to say goodbye and had donated his children's toys to the local charities a day before the incident. He named his brother Michael as the main beneficiary of his life insurance policy. He had it all planned. After the explosion, Chuck and Judy Cox sued the Washington State Department of Social and Health Services, DSHS, in civil court, stating that they had been negligent and their negligence contributed to the death of Charlie and Brandon. When Stephen, who was in jail, was notified of Joshua's death, he reportedly showed no grief, and 2 weeks later he invoked his Fifth Amendment right to refuse questions and not comment on Susan's disappearance anymore. Stephen was convicted of voyeurism charges in May 2012. On February 11, 2013, exactly a year and 6 days after the explosion, Michael jumped from the roof of a parking garage in Minneapolis, where he had moved to attend graduate school. Police believe Michael and Joshua were involved in Susan's disappearance. From May 21 to 22 end 2013, the FBI and the West Valley City Police closed the case and stopped all active investigation into Susan's disappearance, making it one of the longest and most unsolved mysteries in Utah history. Stephen Powell was released on July 11, 2017, after serving his 7-year jail term. He died on July 23, 2018, after suffering a heart attack in Tacoma, Washington. In August 2020, the jury awarded the family a record $98.5 million award against the State Department of Social and Health Services, which was later reduced to $32 million. Looking back at the story, one would wonder that Charlie may have been right when he said Mommy was in the trunk. But this information coming too late. Months after Susan's disappearance, should the police have checked Simpson's Spring immediately after questioning Josh? Why did Josh close his wife's bank account a week after she disappeared? Although there was no physical evidence linking Josh to the killings, it was mostly a case of how do we prove she's dead? Josh was aware he would be charged and decided to take his own life, and sadly that of the kids. Murder cases in the US rarely go to trial without a body, and investigators were probably trying to avoid Josh being acquitted and never tried again. Today, the state of Washington has amended visiting rights to prevent access to kids when a parent is undergoing investigation for murder. Multiple attempts have been made to declare Susan dead, as she's largely believed to have suffered the same fate as her boys in the hands of their father. Susan's case had been the subject of numerous documentaries and crime series, including a book called If I Can't Have You, Susan Powell, Her Mysterious Disappearance, and the Murder of Her Children. Some say Steve murdered Susan, but that Joshua and Michael were accomplices, while others say Josh murdered Susan and his kids. Who do you think was responsible for the mysterious disappearance of Susan? Let us know in the comments section below.